To be able to sort your records by a field, for example, customer name, let's say I want all my customers sorted alphabetically, those that begin with the letter A's up at the top, followed by those that begin with the letter B's, C's, and so on. You can do it one of many ways. One way is to just go ahead and click anywhere within that column that you want to sort the records by that field, customer name, and then come up here on the Home tab to the Sort and Filter group, and there you go. You can see the A's will be up at the top, and it will go down all the way to the Z's. That's known as ascending, or you can flip that and have all those customer names that start with the letter Z up at the top, and then go backwards all the way up to the letter A's, which would be at the very bottom. So if I go ahead and do descending, let's see if it checks out. I got the lowest end of the alphabet that I go. The customer names begins with the W, then it goes backwards, R's, all the way up to the B's. Hey, it worked. So you can do it that way, and then notice that you get this little arrow pointing down. That's to let you know that if you're not figuring it out over here that it's sorting, well, the arrow is telling you it's being sorted, but which way? Down means descending. And it also lets you know that that field's being sorted. So if you're looking at your records, and let's click off somewhere, and you're like, how come this is all jumbled? The customer names, they're not A's to oh, look at that. We got a little indicator to let me know that that field is being sorted. So if I don't like that, and I want to do it ascendingly, A to Z's, there's additional ways you can sort the fields here. Instead of coming up here and clicking on ascending or descending, you can click on that little arrow right there, and there you go, A to Z and Z to A. Do A to Z, and it flips, and you can see the arrows now pointing up. So we're sending up to the upper end of the alphabet, the B's. That's as high as I go, no A's. No customer names that begin with the letter A. And then the other way is to go ahead and right-click anywhere within that column, and hey, look at that. We can go the other way. Now, if you want to revert back to what it was before you started doing all the sorting, then just come up here and say remove the sort. How about numbers? So if I come over here in the customer ID and I want to sort it ascending, what does that mean? Well, for A to Z, that means the smallest number is going to be up at the top, and then as you get down to the Z's, you get larger. If you want to flip that and go from the largest number up to the top, then choose descending. So right now it's sorted, it looks like 31,000s to the 32s, ascending. So if I do descending, then the largest numbers are going to be up at the top, the 32,000s, and go all the way down to the smaller numbers, 31,000s, and then the smallest of the 31,000, 31,365. And then of course you get your sort arrow. Let's remove that. Now you can do more than one sort called consecutive sorts. So for example, if I want to sort the customer name field and the state field, keep in mind that you have to do it one at a time, but whatever is the most recent sort is going to take precedence. So that brings up a good point. If you had 3 or 4 or 5 consecutive sorts, one field after another, the last sort that you do takes precedence over the second to last sort, which takes precedence the second to last over the third to last, and the fourth to last in any case. Let's keep it simple and do 2. And so if I do customer name and I click on the drop down arrow and I say, okay, sort it A to Z, there we go. And then I come over to the state, and I'm saying, okay, let's go ahead and sort that A to Z. It looks at the most recent sort and it says, okay, that takes precedence. And then after it takes precedence, it looks within this sort here and it says, are there any duplicates? Because if there are, I'll revert back to the sort before. And you can see that it's still sorted. It's keeping its sorts as much as it can after we sort by the most recent. And I say as much as it can because if there's no duplicates in here, then there's nothing to sort over here. For example, do I have any duplicate states here? Of course, I've got Utah. So if I come over here, well, it's hard to look at that. Let me go ahead and click on the row headers and select all those states, Utah, so we can look at the highlights and go, okay, of those 4 states that are duplicated in that sort, it reverts to the sort before, and it should sort it ascendingly. Let's check it out. F, H, L, M, N, R. Hey, it works. It's ascending. So let's go ahead and remove that sort. How about if we do it the other way? How about if we flip this and see if it works the other way, Z to A? Of course it will. So we're doing this descending, but now let's go ahead and keep the state the same, ascending A to Z. So we got our Utahs, right? So instead of sorting, after it finds duplicates over here, from the A's down to the Z's, because we flipped it to descending first, after it found the duplicates, then it resorts to that sort, which is descending the lower end R's all the way up to the F's. And then, of course, if we add a third sort that we did first before this one, and then that one's the last one, if it found any duplicate names, then it would go to that first sort, the third sort, and sort whatever it could if we just had 2 duplicates in that first sort, the first of 3. And then, of course, we can go ahead and remove the sorts. Now remember, to find out how many records are in a table, look down at the record navigation bar and you can see we've got a total of 47. Now if I don't want to see all the records, just say those employees who work in the state of Utah, I could sort it and it would group them all together ascendingly, where the A's are up at the top and the U's down at the bottom. But you can imagine if you had thousands of records and more than just 2 states to work with, then it's just easier to filter, or what's called filtering, where you can set the criteria to view only those records like those employees who work in the state of Utah. And you can do it one of many ways. One way is just to come up here on the Home tab to the Sort and Filter group and click on the filter, which looks like a funnel. And I don't know where it's got the filter, somewhere maybe at that point where you pour stuff into it and it says, I'm going to squeeze this out and just bring this in. And right now, I just want to see those employees who work in the state of Utah. So when I click on it, it's pulling up the employee ID. And why? Because that's where I'm at. So I click cancel and I want to focus on the state field. Then I can come up here and click on filter and filter just, well, if you had a lot and you just want to choose one, instead of unchecking all of them, you could deselect all and then just check the one. Or if you only want a few, then you just uncheck a few. And then when you're ready, go ahead and click okie dokie, and there we go, just Utah. Now a couple of things happen, the least of which is it filtered out Arizona and pulled in Utah. And then you can see up here next to the state, you got that little funnel. Lets me know that that field is being filtered. Other indicators are down below on the status bar. It says that this is being filtered. And also, you can see it's being filtered here. And then you've got the toggle filter button. That means that if you want to go back to the way it was before you filtered it, going, wait a second, I want to see what it looked like before, click on it, and it takes us back to the way it was. And you can click on it again, and hey, it's toggled now. We can go back to our original filter. Now let me go ahead and save it. What would happen if I closed out of it and open up the employees table again? Double click, and it's not filtered, but it remembers the toggle. So I can come up here and click on toggle, and it goes back to just Utah. Oh, isn't that fancy? You can also toggle it down below by clicking on filtered. It's unfiltered now, but if I click on unfiltered, it goes to filtered. And if you don't want that filter to be toggled in anymore, then to get rid of the toggle, you can just come back up here to that field that's got that little funnel, click on the drop down arrow, and then say you want to clear the filter from the state, and there you go. No more togglage. Now you don't have to come up to the top on the ribbon to be able to filter. For example, if I want to be able to filter by Arizona, how about just a right click? And when I right clicked on that field AZ, it pulls up where I can have it just equal AZ. Left click on it and it only pulls in AZ. Oh, isn't that nice? Let's go ahead and click on the drop down arrow and clear that. And then right click on AZ again, or maybe Utah, doesn't matter, one of the fields. Now it equals Utah, so if you just want to see Utah, there you go. Then does not equal Utah, contains only UT, or it doesn't contain UT in the field. You can have text filters, and then you can say, well, it ends with, and then go ahead and type in the letter T for Utah. In any case, let me click cancel. How about numbers? How does it work with numbers? Let's see, which one of my fields are numbers? Zip code? Could be a text field. So let's come up here and right click on the tab, go to the design view. Okay, employee ID is a number field, department number is a number field, and the weekly hours is a number field. Okay, let's go to the weekly hours, right click and go back to the datasheet view. Okay, we got to save it first. All right, yes. And then go over to the weekly hours and see what it looks like when you right click on 40. So you can filter by selection again, saying, okay, since I right clicked on 40, I can filter by 40 where it equals 40, or it doesn't equal 40, less than or equal to 40, or greater than or equal to 40, or do your number filters, or it can be less than, select less than, and then type in a number. Of course, you get out of the scope of 40 if you say less than 35 and hit enter. Well, less than or equal to 35 because it's pulling up 35. And let's go ahead and click on the drop-down arrow and clear the filter for weekly hours. Now let's say that we want to filter more than one field. Okay, let's go ahead and filter it by state. Like if I go ahead and click, like in the field Utah, of course I can right click, but you also have the option to filter by selection up here on the Home tab in the Sort and Filter group. selection, click on the drop down arrow, and of course it's like right clicking on the field, so you can right click. I prefer doing it that way. Equals Utah, doesn't equal, contains or doesn't contain Utah in the name of that field. This equals Utah. Let's say that I want to come over here into the first name and pull up all those whose names, because I talked to an employee today and it was Matt. It was with an M. Matt, Mary. Oh, I can't remember. There's so many M's to look through and to scroll, but I know it began with the letter M. So what we can do is we can go ahead and right click over here anywhere and say we want to do a text filter and say that it begins with, hey, there we go. Select that, type in M, hit enter. Cool, we narrowed it down. Oh, it was Monty. Now we were able to narrow that down. And so now you can see we've got two filters, a funnel there for first name and a funnel for state. And of course you can toggle back to the way it was before it was filtered, toggle. It remembers both filters. Now if you have two or more filters and you want to clear them, of course it's, for me, very inefficient to click on one and say clear this one, click on the other one, clear this one. That's rather annoying. Instead, let's go ahead and click off. And then just come up here to the sort and filter group, click on advanced, and say we want to clear all filters. Oh, that's nice. Okay, last thing. Let's say you set up a filter and you really like it and you don't want to reapply the filters again, but you have other filters that you like, certain situations you want to pull up as well that you don't want to create those filters over again either. What you can do is you can create your first filter and save it as a query. Create your second filter, and that's right, you can save as many different versions of your filters as queries. That way you don't have to recreate the wheel, as it were, when you set up your filters. So if you got a complex filter that includes a lot of different options and different fields, let's go ahead and, as far as this example goes, let's keep it simple. You can create your own complex filters. But let's say I want to go ahead and filter for the last name and first name and maybe for the state. Well, let's just go ahead and do it for the state here of Arizona. Right click and say it equals Arizona, and then right click over here in first name and say the text filters begins with, oh, we'll do M again for Arizona this time. Hit enter, and that's easy to recreate, but if yours is more complex, you don't want to keep recreating it over and over again. Once you have it set up the way you like it, go ahead and save it as a query. How do you do that? Well, with your table here selected, you want to go backstage File, go down to Save As, and then go to Save It as an Object. Click on Save As, and then come over here and click on Save As so we can actually get the window to save it as a different object, not as a table. We already got a table. We want to save it as a query so it can take a snapshot of our filter and put it into the query here. And instead of copy of this time a table, it's going to be a query, QRY, 3-letter prefix. As we talked about in an earlier training video, the purpose for that, and we'll say in Arizona begins with and then click okie dokie, and hey, there we go. It pulled up the query in the datasheet view. Just like a table, it's got a datasheet view, the front view, and so it's got only those in Arizona that begin with the letter M. Oh, that's nice. So I can go ahead and click on employees, and it's right there as well. Cool. So I've got this one. Let me go back to the query and close out. And then if I want to go ahead and change this up by clearing all the filters, again, advanced, to clear all filters, and then we'll keep it simple here because I think you're getting the idea. And you go ahead and you do your filters equals Utah. I know this is very simple, but you do more filters, right? And then you want to go ahead and save it again. File, save as object, save as, to get it to where we can change it to a query, and 3-letter prefix to identify that it's a query. And you can even type in filter for Utah, UT. And then click okie dokie, and hey, there we go. Now we have two. So I can keep creating those, as many as I'd like. And let me go ahead and close out of here. So when I clear the filters here for my table, or maybe this is the one that I use the most, so I leave that one, the toggle, but I want to quickly find up all those employees in Arizona that begin with the letter M. Go ahead and double click on that, and hey, it pulls it right up. Now, we haven't covered this yet, but to give you a heads up with queries, if you're kind of curious, that of course when you right click on a table, you go to the design view of the table. We talked about that, but when you right click on a query and go to the design view, well, here's a heads up. There's the table. Down below are all the fields from this table that are going to be displayed in the datasheet view. And down below you have the criteria that says has to be like or begin with M for only those employees that work in the state of AZ. Isn't that cool? I bet you're excited to learn about queries. Let's go ahead and close out of here. And now you've got as many different filters that are called queries as you want to set up or save from your table, your filter as a query. Before we talk about subdatasheets, let's quickly go over or do a review of what datasheets are. As you recall in an earlier training video, there are only two objects in Access that have datasheets, and they are your tables and your queries. Now by default, when you open up either one, it goes to the datasheet view. You have a sheet that contains your data that you can edit or add additional records to. And you can see there's the customers table that I have open. And how do you know it's a table? Well, by that little icon. And how do you know you're in the datasheet view? By what you see up here on the Home tab in the Views group as its opposite. Meaning that if you want to go to another view, like the design view that has a pencil and ruler, when you click on it, flips it over. Now it flips back to the datasheet view with the datasheet icon. So that means you're not in it. It means if you want to view it, then you got to click on it. So you can see there's the design, click on view, and we go back to the datasheet view. And the same with our queries, double click. Default opens up in the datasheet view, and then you get the design button, click on it. Different design than your tables, and then to go back to the datasheet view of the query, click on it, and we're back. Let's go ahead and close out of the query here. Now that you know what datasheets are, you can actually have what are called subdatasheets. And the definition is that they are datasheets nested within datasheets, or like tables within tables, but that are related and can be expanded to review related data. Now, I don't know if you noticed this, but when I open up my customers table, I get these little plus signs here. That means that if I click on any one of these, it's going to open up and find the related table. Actually not find, there actually is a related table to the customer table, but which one is it? Or how many related tables do I have to the customers table? Well, let's find out. Let's click on this one, and it opens up a related table. And this isn't the only table, but we'll go over that in just a minute. But it picks one of them, and this one is the, let's see, order ID is the label for this column, order date. I'm thinking it's the orders table, because in there, when you double click, you have the order ID, the order date, and so on. Let's go ahead and close out of that. And so what's cool about this is that if a customer calls in like Happy Town Play World, and I'm already in their subdata sheet for the orders that they made, and they want to make a new order, well, I can just come down here. By default, we've got the order date. I can change that. Type in the item number and go ahead and type in the quantity and save it. Or if they call back and need to make changes, you can easily come and do that here. Instead of 7 for order ID 22, let's type in 8. Then I can click on the pencil and it saves it to 8. So order ID 22, when I open up the orders table, I scroll down to 22. Is it 7? No, it's 8. And vice versa. If I make a change here and I change it back to 7, hold down the Shift key and hit Enter to save the record, and I close out of here. Is it, oh, it went back to 7. So what you do in one affects the other, vice versa, because it's related. And of course, you can come down here and expand additional ones for like Roofit, and they got quite a few orders there. Cool. And instead of opening up each one at a time, if you want to expand all of them at one time, then come up here on the Home tab, go to the Records group, click on More, go down to Subdatasheet, and well, we don't get the option to expand all of them, and the reason being is because our subdatasheets don't have subdatasheets. You could, but well, not what we're doing here. We're keeping it simple. And so what I need to do is if I want to expand all of them, I just have to go ahead and click out of one of these subdatasheets into the main datasheet, any record in the main datasheet, and then come back up here and say More, Subdatasheet, to expand all, and there you go. And then, of course, to collapse them all, make sure you're within the main data sheet, one of the records there, and then back up here, More, to Subdatasheet, to go ahead and collapse. Now, in order for this to work, because by default Access will automatically or should automatically pull this in a related table, well, the key word is that it has to be related. So the customer table is related to the orders table, and if you recall in an earlier training video, when you come up here and click on the Database Tools tab, go to the Relationships group and click on Relationships. Hey, there we go. Our customers table is related to the orders table, and it's a one-to-many, as opposed to the one-to-one relationship with our billing information. So when it comes to contacting our customers and bill them, I just want to talk to one person and not many, somebody who takes care of all their billing, that we can go ahead and get them to pay up through that one person and not many, so we got the one-to-one. Now, if I want to go ahead and go back to my data sheet for the customers table and say, no, I don't want it to go to the orders table, I want it to go to the billing info table. That's who I want to see as a subdata sheet. Okay, to do that, let's go ahead and close out of here. Come back here, and we already have a subdata sheet related. Well, if you want to remove it, then just go ahead and come up here, click on More, go down to Subdatasheet and remove. And also, if you open up your table and you don't see the plus signs, but you know that you have your tables related, well, just do what I'm doing here and you'll be able to hook up to the right table. But again, make sure it's related. So the only two tables that are related are the orders and the billing info. So we're going to hook up to the billing info here instead of the default orders. And to do that, let's come back up here, click on More, go down to Subdatasheet, and say we want to insert a subdatasheet. Now you can have subdatasheets based upon tables, queries, and we just have one, or both, and it lists, well, both tables and queries. But let's keep it simple and focus on the tables. And then down below you have the fields that you link to in order to be able to identify the primary key to the foreign key field, so you can link the tables and have the, well, in the main data sheet, the subdata sheet or the related table pull up as the subdata sheet. And so here, if I want to be able to have it related to the billing info, then I need to select that, because if I don't have it selected, then I'm not going to get what I want down here. It may be something else like orders. So the master field is the table that I'm currently in that I want to link up the child as a subdata sheet into the main table. And so when I click on the drop-down arrow, I got the customer ID, right? But that's for the orders table if I want to link it to the orders table and pull the orders table in as a subdata sheet. Don't want to do that. Want to do it for the billing info, and then click on the master and you get a list of all the fields. But I want to do it based upon the primary key and the foreign key field, so I can have it relate and link just right here. You got the other fields you can link to if there is another field that's named differently, and that's why I have my foreign key fields. So that's the primary key field in my table here, the main table. The foreign key field again named the same name as the primary key, because if not, and I go to the billing info and I'm trying to find the customer ID foreign key field that has the same data type and type of data as the primary key field in the customers table, unless you can remember, that's going to be hard, but that's easy, right? Customer ID to customer ID. So it's that simple. Click okie dokie and we're done. So when I go ahead and click on one of these plus signs, it pulls up the information as a subdata sheet from the billing info table to the main table here, the customers table. And what's interesting is that you get a plus sign to that. And why? Because it's a one-to-one relationship. It keeps going back and forth. So for like Ghost Hunters America, the customer name, we bill Brett Maroon over at Ghost Hunters America, and we contact this person. But when I click to expand that, it says that this person is the contact person over at the customer name here, Ghost Hunters America, and the contact person for Ghost Hunters is Brett, and Brett is the contact person at Ghost Hunters America, and it just goes on and on and on. And so I'm glad it had that one-to-many relationship as the default, unless I want to change it, as I just showed you how you can do it here. In any case, if you want to go ahead and close out of this, just keep in mind wherever the cursor's at, and I say close, meaning that maybe you want to collapse this. I mean, you can do it manually here by clicking on this little minus sign, but wherever you're at here, and you come up here to the more, and you say subdata sheet, and you want to collapse, it just collapses everything from that point below. So if you want to collapse everything, well, all the subdata sheets within the main data sheet, then you got to get into the main data sheet. Just any one of these records, it doesn't matter. Then come up here and click More, go to Subdata Sheet, and say you want to collapse all, and we're back to where we started. Now we're in the Customers table. Let me go ahead and close out of here, and we won't save the layout. We'll just say no. So when I double-click and open up the Customers table and I expand it, it goes back to the default, which was the Orders table, instead of me changing and saying, no, let's go ahead and link up as a subdata sheet to the billing info. So keep that in mind, that if you want to save the layout, then in our case, it was the most recent link that we connected with, which was the billing info table. Now, having said that, let's go to the orders table. Double click. Now in the orders table, I don't get a plus sign. And why is that? because in a relationship of one-to-many, it doesn't go backwards from many to one and give you a plus sign to expand it. It's not going to list it. Just think of it in a one-to-many relationship that one comes first, or one-way viewing to many, but never many back to one. But nevertheless, you can go ahead and do it, and it will insert it. It's just not done by default in a one-to-many relationship where the many relationship, in this case the order table, will list it. So if you want to force it, because by default it's not showing it, a subdata sheet back to the one relationship in this one-to-many relationship, that is from the orders to the customers. And then go ahead and click anywhere within here, of course, and come up here, click on More. Go down to Subdatasheet, and we want to go to the customers. And now the name of the primary key field here, the master field, is always going to be the current table that you're in, or query. And so the primary key field, customer ID, perfect. And then the linked child field, or the customer table, the subdata sheet that we want to insert, or the data sheet as a subdata sheet into the main data sheet, is also customer ID. I mean, Access is going to find it and default it for you, unless of course you want to change it, but I'm not going to do that and mess with it. So I don't have to click on the drop down arrows and find it, unless of course you have it listed under a different name, in which case it should still find the same data type or type of data and be able to pull it up. But it just makes it easier for me to go, oh, customer ID to customer ID, the primary key to the foreign key field in the customers table. Click okie dokie, and let's go ahead and expand it to find out who made the order ID 5, and it was Ghost Hunters America. Then I can expand that and find out that Ghost Hunters America had not only this order that they made, order ID number 5 on this date, but, well, there it is, number 5, but one before that, order number 4, and all the rest of the orders. And then, of course, you can expand that, and it just goes in a never-ending loop. So let's go ahead and click out of that and come up here and do something more, which is going to be subdata sheet to remove to get us back to something less, where we have no subdata sheet in the orders. A query is based upon one or more tables of data and or other queries, and it can be used to filter in only those fields that you want to see. And you can organize those fields into any order, like what field comes first, second, third, and so on, as well as performing calculations on those fields. Well, those fields have to contain numbers, of course. And so if I want to create a query based upon, like, let's say this table, let's double click to take a look at the table real quick. And let's say that I just want to see in my query, not all of these fields, just the asset tag and the date received. And the reason why I want to use a query, because it's more efficient just to pull up two fields, at least in two ways. One way is because when you open up the table, it's pulling up additional fields. It'll slow down your network or your computer, especially if you have, like, oh gosh, a lot of fields here that it's got to pull in all that data for. But also maybe slow you down, because if I want to focus on the asset tag and the date received, I got this guy that's in the way. So if I got to go from, well, pick a number here and go 1008, this column's not right next to it, is it? This one's in the way. Now, you don't have to create a query if you want to, well, do some organization within the table here, like as far as maybe putting the date received field next to the asset tag, so you can go ahead and go from one field to the next and not have to jump a field. And you can do that one of a couple of ways. You can either right-click on the field, the column header, the label for that column, the field name here, manufacturer, because when you right-click on it, it selects the entire column and it allows you to hide that field. Cool. Let's go ahead and click and drag and select the others and right-click on the selection there to hide those as well. Now that's fine, but only for that session. And what I mean by that is that, well, if I go ahead and close out and it says you want to save this layout, in other words, keep the fields that are visible, and the other ones hidden. You could say yes. So when you come back and double click, well, there you go. But what if you want to change this now and go, okay, that was fine for that session, but now I want to see a few more fields or all the fields, and then from time to time, come back to viewing just these two? Well, you can go ahead and do all that work, or the other option is to create a query based upon this table and take a snapshot of it, or set it up that you want to be able to see just those two fields and call it query 1, fields 1 and 2, or however you want to name it. And then for maybe a third field, go ahead and save a second query based upon this table that shows just those three fields. So that way I can just go ahead and double click query 1 to see those two, double click query 2 to see 3 fields, and not have to tweak it just to go back to the way I want to see it or to see other fields. So it's just for that session, as it were. Now to go ahead and unhide the fields, just right-click on any column header here and go down to unhide. You can see all those that are not checked are the ones that are hidden. So we want to check those to bring them all back. Close out. And then the other way, instead of hiding the fields, is you can go ahead and click and drag and move the columns around by clicking on the column header, holding down the left mouse button and dragging over. And there you go. So that way you can just look from this column to that one and not have to jump over one. But again, it's not very efficient if you want to be able to just view these two fields here and pull up only those two as opposed to the rest. Well, it's more efficient as far as you not having your eyes wander or trying to connect the fields when they're just right next to each other. Now, if that's not a selling point for you to want to use a query, well, you can base a query upon two or more tables. In other words, I've got my manufacturer number here, but I don't know the name of the manufacturer. So if we're having problems with these computers that seem to be number 3, well, what's number 3? I'd have to open up the manufacturers table, right, to find out the name that the ID is tied to. So double click, number 3 is Macron. So that can be very annoying. Instead, I can create a query based upon these two tables to just pull in the name if I don't want the manufacturer ID and I just want to see the name. So I'd get a spreadsheet like this, but in a query, of course, that just pulls in these, like let's say the asset tag, the date received, and the purchase price, and then have over here the manufacturer name. So I'm not pulling up any extra fields from this table or any extra from the manufacturers. Now you could say, wait a second, what about the subdatasheets? Can I just go ahead and insert the manufacturers table into this one as a subdatasheet? So in that subdatasheet training video that we went over, you get a little plus sign that you can click on. So like for this record right here, I could click on it to expand it, and for number 3, it would show down below Macron. Well, yes, but remember, the subdatasheet pulls in everything, and so if I had a lot of fields in the manufacturers, it's not as efficient, especially if I don't need to see additional fields, but maybe just the manufacturer ID and name. Well, that's all it's got, but I'm saying if it had more, if you don't want to pull in those additional fields and be more efficient, then again, we're back to the query. So let's go ahead and create a query based upon these two tables, the computers and the manufacturers. And like I said, let's go ahead and pull in the asset tag, the date received, the purchase price, and the manufacturer's name. Now we want to make sure that these tables are related, because when I create the query based upon these two tables, if there's nothing that links them up, that relates them, then there's nothing preventing, like this record here that says 3, well, they are related because we got the foreign key field here, saying that, okay, which record does this ID go to? But you can see right here, that's the foreign key field, the manufacturer. Let me hover over to the right of that column header until I can get arrows pointing in opposite directions and double click really fast, manufacturer ID. So there's the foreign key manufacturer ID, which is the primary key, the manufacturer ID. Well, you don't see it here. Let me double click really fast in the manufacturers table. Let's just go ahead, come up here to the database tools tab, relationships group, click on relationships, and there we go. We've got the computers table, the manufacturer ID, and you can see it's related to the primary key field over in the manufacturers tables, so we're good to go. Because if we try to create a query based upon two tables that aren't related, well, you're going to get a field that you pull in from this table. If this wasn't related, that's not synced up with anything over here. But because they are related, then whatever manufacturer number is on record, let's say number 1, is going to have the correct name here that we're going to pull over from the manufacturer field, as opposed to just not being related and being jumbled. So great. Now you can either have them related directly when you create your query or indirectly. So I could have the departments table, create a query based upon that, and also include the manufacturers, because even though they're not directly related, well, indirectly through all these tables, it will see it and bring it up. So maybe for this department, HR, we only use computers, or give HR the computers manufactured by Macron. And so that would be good to know and to be able to pull up really quick. Now when we create our query, this brings up a good point. If I just want to see the manufacturer name, the asset tag, the date received, and the purchase price, I don't have to include the ID because that's all done behind the scenes. Once we have it related, as you see here, it'll keep the records organized and know that for record 1, if it was ID number 3, Macron, Even though I don't pull in the ID to see my query, it will know that macron is for record number 1 because it's already taken care of it and keeping it organized behind the scenes. So that's really nice. Let's go ahead and close out of here. Close out of this, and we'll save the layout and that. Save that as well. And to create our query, come up here, click on the Create tab. Let's go down to the Queries group. And you got 2 ways of creating a query. You can do it by wizard or by design. Design is from scratch. By wizard, Microsoft has what are called wizards in it that is going to ask you a bunch of questions. Based upon your answers, it's going to create, in this case, a query for us. So let's go ahead and click on it. And there we go. And so the first question in the query is, what kind of query do you want to create? You can see down below that this wizard creates a select query. Well, a simple query is called a select query, and there are other action queries. Well, we've got a few here, like the cross-tab, finding duplicates or unmatched, and there's additional queries, but I want to keep it simple. So the wizard's going to create a select query from the fields that we pick, and those fields can be based upon 2 or more tables and or other queries. And you can see over here, I just had the 4 tables. It won't be any other queries because I don't have any other queries. Let's go ahead and click OK. The second question is which fields do you want in your query? So in the image here, you can see you got a bunch of, they're different data sheets representing tables or queries that you want to pull some fields from and put it all into one data sheet, well, in the data sheet of this query that we're creating. And then down below, you can choose from tables or queries. We just have tables, so when you click on the drop-down arrow, you can see the 4 here comes from 4 over here. And so we got our computers, and down below, all the fields that are available from the computers table. And over here, what fields we want to add to our query, we want to select. And you can do that one of a couple of ways. You can either select one here and click the arrow to add it over to the right, or if you want to move it back, click on the arrow to move it back. Or if you want to add all of them, click on the double arrows, adds them all. Let's put them all back. Or you can go ahead and just double click, like double click on the asset tag. I don't want the manufacturer ID, so we can skip that. And even though we don't add it, it'll still keep track of it. The records together, like what manufacturer ID and name goes to record 1, 2, and 3. So this is just for us, what we want to see. Let's do the date received, double click, and the purchase price. Now I want the manufacturer name, but it's not in this table. So we have to go to the other table, manufacturers, to be able to add the manufacturer name. Double click, and there we go. So I have a total of 4 fields from 2 different tables, the first 3 from computers, the last one from the manufacturer. So let's go ahead and click Next. And it says, would you like to add a detail or summary query? Now why is it asking me that? It's because of the purchase price field. It's a number field. So I can either show the detail of all those fields, or I can get a summary of the purchase price field. And you'll notice over here that you get different images. So if I do the detail, it says if I'm pulling in numbers from one table or query and numbers from another, then it keeps them separate, the details. But if I want to go ahead and add them together or sum them up or get the average, then what it does is it takes them, and you can see the numbers here. Let's see, 5 and 7, and it puts them over here. What's 5 plus 7? 12. And then those 2 fields adds them up. 8 plus 1 is 9, and so you can get the summary options. Well, it's right there. Summary options. The only field that has numbers that I've added to my query is the purchase price field that allows me to go ahead and get a total or get the average or the lowest number in that purchase price field or the highest number. And down below I can count the records in the computers, get a total count there. But I'm going to go ahead and click Cancel. We'll do that later on. I just want to keep it simple. We'll just stick with show every field of the record, not just get the totals or the average for those fields or whatever other option that we just went over in the summary options. And click Next. Okay, and then it says finally, what title do you want for your query? It gives us the default, and I don't like this one because it gives me the name of the table, but at the end it says it's a query. And remember, when I'm working behind the scenes, as we'll go over in later training videos, in design view of other objects, this can fool me because I'm looking at this going, oh, it's a table. And I'd select that thinking it's a table. If I don't come over here and go, oh, it's a query, well, which is it? So what I'm going to do to keep it simple, I'm just going to get rid of the and suffix saying it's a query and type in the 3-letter prefix, QRY, saying that, okay, great. Now I know, looking at the beginning of it, it's a query, but what's the name of it? Computers. As I look over here, That's a table. Now what's the name of the table? Computers. So when I'm in the design view and I see the names of two computers here, I can just look at the prefix and go, oh, that's the query and that's the table. And then down below, that's all that they need. So do you want to open up the query to modify it? Change the design, make a few tweaks, or you just want to go ahead and view the details, the data therein. Let's go ahead and just view the information, click on Finish. In the datasheet view of our new query. Hey, you can see up at the top the name of it, QRY Computers, and it's been added over here in the navigation pane under the name here, Queries. Cool. And again, it's easy to detect even if we didn't have the three-letter prefix here, because it'll put it in the queries here, as opposed to the design view where it's not going to be this organized and say, hey, this is a query and that's a table. All you get is the name. So that's the only thing that will differentiate between the two names here, being the same, computers, is the prefix. Tibble for table and query for query. And so it pulled in everything I wanted. The asset tag, date received, purchase price, and manufacturer. Oh, is it the ID? Well, we know it's not the ID, but again, if you can't see the entire label for the column header, just hover over to the right-hand side until you can see arrows pointing in opposite directions, then either click and drag, or to do a best fit, double-click, and it fits it to the longest text within that column. So let's double-click to do best fits on all of them, because that's the best thing. Great. And let's go to the design view. Now, if you come up here on the Create tab, you see over here, we don't have the option to change. It's only on the Home tab that we can change views. So there's the design view, or if you don't want to change tabs and keep it on the Create tab, that's fine. Just right-click on the tab to go to the design view, and there you go. It's divided into two sections. The top section is where it contains the tables that this query is based upon, and then down below in the grid, the fields that are viewable in this query, selected, of course, from the tables up above. Now, if you can't see all the fields, you can go ahead and scroll, but I don't like scrolling. So I'll hover over the bottom border until I can see arrows pointing up and down, click and drag, and there we go. And you can see the relationship that we saw in the relationships window, that it's here as well. The relationship carries over. They don't divorce or break apart. And so you can see right here that the manufacturer ID, the primary key, goes to the foreign key field here. And then down below, you've got the name of the field in the top row, and then below that, the table that the field has been taken from. So the asset tag is from the computers, the date received computers, that one's the manufacturers. And if you want to be able to add the manufacturer ID, because maybe you're thinking, well, I'd like to see the number, kind of memorize these things. Well, you can either come down here and click in the field and click on the drop-down arrow, and it lists all the fields that are available up above, including the asterisk. And the asterisk means that when you select that, it'll include all the fields here. You just don't have to add, like you see down here, each field separately. You just put the asterisk down here, and it will automatically add all the fields for you, and we'll go over that in a later training video. But if I want to add the manufacturer's ID, you can click on the drop-down arrow and say, okay, we want to go to the manufacturer's table. Now this one says manufacturer. I can't see the end, whether it's just manufacturer or it's the ID. So that's not helpful for me right here, so I'll click off. The other way is just to go ahead and either click and drag it down and add it, or you can come up here and double-click. Of course, if I do that again, well, we've got two manufacturer IDs. That's not going to work. So if you make it a boo-boo, then go ahead and you see that thin gray bar up at the top? When you hover over it, you get this black arrow pointing down. When I'm down below it, don't get the black arrow, so go back up above. When you see the black arrow, click and it selects the entire column. Then hit the delete key on the keyboard and it gets rid of it. Click, delete. Now, does it matter which table the manufacturer ID comes from? No, because it's the same thing, so I could do it from the manufacturer's table. Then when I'm done, I can come up here on the Related Contextual Design tab because I'm in the design view, and to get to the front view or the datasheet view to view the data that are in these fields here, come over here to where it says results, and I can click on the view button or I can click on the fun run button. The difference between the two is that the run, of course, will take us to the datasheet view, but it'll actually perform the action specified in the query. So more specifically, you see here where it says select query, that is this query type. You can select other query types, like make a table based upon this query. So you can take the records and create a new table based upon this query. And when you click on Run, takes us to the datasheet view, but it also takes what you have in here and through a couple of steps, it'll create a new table. Or you can take the records that's found in this query and add it to another table. Or you can go ahead and do an update, like maybe multiply the purchase price by a percentage. You can do a cross tab or do a delete, saying, okay, I want to go ahead and delete certain records within this query. So down below, you got a criteria field, so you can say, okay, in the asset tag, I just want those asset tags that are less than a certain number. And then the rest I don't want to see, they're obsolete, let's get rid of them. And so when you select delete query and you click run, or any of these other queries in quick run besides the select, it'll take you to the datasheet view and it will delete the records, update them, add them, or make a table. We'll cover that in a later training video, but because this is a select query, it does nothing but just takes us right to the datasheet view. So that's the fun run button, datasheet view. Let's go back to the design, or you can just click on the datasheet view button, same view. And well, that one's kind of huge, isn't it? If we double click, well, that's the best fit, but that's going towards the largest text in the column. That's the name of the column here, manufacturer ID. And oh my goodness, look at that. Let's double click really fast. And there you go. Let's click on this one, drag it over here. So they have the manufacturer ID. And since we know it's the ID, we can go ahead and collapse that. So we can just go, well, let's do man, and then click off. And then when we're done, if we want to go ahead and close out, let's say, do you want to save the changes? Yes. Double click. We're back to our fancy query. As you recall in the previous training video, we created a query by using the query wizard. Here I want to show you how you can create a query from scratch or by design, where you don't have to go through all the steps in the query wizard to get what you need. So let's come up here, click on the Create tab, go to the Queries group, and there it is, Query by Design. Sounds like some fashion company that's doing your query. It's by design. Let's go ahead and click on it. Creates the query, but before we can get into it, it says, wait a second. Remember, your queries has to be based upon either one or more tables and or queries. So it has a list here of all the tables that we can add to our query. Do I have any queries? Of course not. You can see none over here. And then both, it just shows the tables. So to be able to add a query to the query here, or a table to the query, you can do it one of many ways. You can either go ahead and double click to add it, and there you go. Or with it selected, you can go ahead and click add. Of course, now I have two here and I just need one, not a duplicate, but let me click on add again. So I can show you that every time you add more than the original, you have the original name, then the original name plus one, as it were, and then plus two, or the second copy of the original. And so to get rid of these duplicates here, let me close out, you can do it one of a couple of ways. You can either right click on the title bar and click on remove, or you can click on the title bar and hit the delete key, and there you go, we're back. In fact, let's go ahead and remove that as well. And then to bring up that table window again, so we can add a table or a query or a combination of them to our query, you can either come up here on the Design tab to the Query Setup group and click on Show Table, same window, or let me close out, right-click anywhere in this gray area up in the top section here and go down to Show Table. And so let's just go ahead and, well, the other way that you can go ahead and add your tables or queries or both is if you want to add more than just one at the same time, do a block selection, use the Shift key. So if I want to select everything from this point, or let's do that point, down to the bottom, hold down the Shift key and then click the bottom and it selects everything in between. And then you can click Add. Or if it's non-linear, then just go ahead and select one, hold down the Control key and click any others and then click Add, and there you go. I'm just going to look at employees, double click, add that, and close out. And so your query is divided into two sections. You have the top part that has a list of, well, all the tables, either from a table or a query. And from those, you want to be able to pick those fields you want to add down below into the grid or into this bottom section, the grid here, those fields that you want to show up in the datasheet view when you view your query. So let's go ahead and, well, I can't see all the fields here without scrolling, and I don't like scrolling, so let me hover over the bottom border of this table until I can see arrows pointing up and down, click and drag, and I don't get enough room. So if that annoys you and you want more room, then you got the split bar here that when you hover over it, you can see arrows pointing up and down. Go ahead and click and drag either up or down, in this case down to give us more room, and then click and drag the bottom border, and that's nice. Now I feel better. And then to go ahead and add the fields here from your table to the grid down below, you can see each row has its own name. So here's a list of, well, this row is for all the fields or the name of the fields that have been added. This will show what table they're coming from if we have more than one table. And then these other fields we'll cover in a later training video, how you can sort that field alphabetically, ascendingly, descendingly, condescendingly. No, I'm kidding on that last one. And then whether or not we want to show that and the criteria. Go ahead and let's double click, which is one way to add a field down below to the grid. The employee's last name, so you can see the name of the field and from what table it's pulling from. And the criteria, you can say, well, all those employees whose last name begins with the letter M. Like I said, we'll cover that in a later training video. So to keep it simple, to add those fields down below to the grid, you can double click to add them, or you can go ahead and click, well, let's do the next adjacent one. You get the arrow for the field here. Remember, keep it in that row for the field that you want to choose. Click on the arrow, and hey, you can go ahead and let's do first name. Now you can do that, or you can come back up here to the table, and instead of double clicking, you can click and drag. So if I choose weekly hours, let me hold down the control key and do also hourly rate. So when I click and drag those selections and go to the very next available field, the third one, and let go, it adds them both. And so if I'm like, oh, wait a second, I want hourly rate before weekly hours, what you can do is you can hover over that thin gray bar up at the top above the field here, or the field row, until you see a black arrow pointing down, because if you move down off of it, you don't see it. So move so you can see the black arrow, click on it, it selects the entire column, and then you want to make sure that you get the pointer there, because if you move down, you get the I-beam. It thinks that you want to edit the name of the field here or change it. We don't want to do that. So we want to go back up to the top where that gray bar used to be that's now highlighted in black until you can see the pointer, and then you can click and drag that guy over and let go, and hey, that's nice, we reordered it. So now hourly rate comes before weekly hours. And if you made a mess or a boo-boo here and you're like, I don't want this, well, just click on that thin gray bar again above the field that you don't want so you can select it, hit the delete key, and it's gone. Or you can, let's click on this one, select it, and do multiple selections by clicking and dragging to the right or left, hitting the delete key, and now they're all gone. And let's go ahead and add those fields back again. Let's do last name, hold down the control key, select first name, weekly hours, hourly rate, then click and drag to the first field, and there we go. Last name, first name, weekly hours, hourly rate. We'll leave them as is. I won't move them around. And then to be able to see this in the datasheet view, the data within those fields, you can come up here on the Design tab to the Results group, click on the View button or the Fun Run. Now remember, I talked about this in the previous training video. Some of this, what I've already talked about, I've covered, but let's go over it one more time. The Run button performs a specific action or an action query. Because we have a simple select query, there's no action except just to view the data. But if we want to make a table, add data to another table, update a field, like maybe increase the cost of a field, multiply it by a percentage, or others, cross tab or delete, and other additional action queries. Well, when you click Run, it does two things. It actually performs the action here if we want to update or append information to another table, and it'll take us to the datasheet view. So if I click Run, datasheet view, because it's a select query, well, there's no action except just to view the data here. Go back to the Design or click the View button, which brings up a good point. If you have an action before, like this one's probably the most dangerous one, or among the top dangerous, that if you set your query saying, I want to see those records that contain specific information, and you want to delete those, you may want to check first before you delete them that those are the records you want to delete. So if you select Delete before you click Run and delete them, you can click on the View button without running it and checking it first and going, oh yeah, those are the records I want to get rid of. Go back to the Design, then click Run, and then it'll go ahead and delete all the records and then take you to the datasheet view to show that, hey, I deleted it. In any case, in this case, it's a simple query, a select query. So we can click on the View button. We're back here. Last name, first name, weekly hours, hourly rate. And you can also move these fields around. You can click on the column header, select it, the entire column, and then click on the column header again and move it, well, in front of weekly hours. So now hourly rate comes before weekly hours. When I go back to the Design view, is hourly rate before weekly hours? No, it's just in the datasheet view, not in the design. So for you on the back end, you may have things set up the way you want to see it as the designer, or maybe somebody on the front end doesn't like it, and so you're like, fine, I'll set that up for you so it doesn't mess with my back end view of the way I want to see things. And we probably ought to save our query before we get too far. And so let's come up here, click on the Save button, and the 3-letter prefix, QRY for query, and we'll just do EE for employees, and then hit Enter, and there you go. It adds it over here, and now it's saved. So when I close out, I can come over here, double-click to open it up. Opens up by default. In the datasheet view, let me close out. And if it doesn't open up in the datasheet view because maybe you got an action query or something else going on, or maybe you don't have it set up correctly, which we'll cover later on, you can right-click on it and open it up in Design, make your changes and fixes before you actually view it. A couple more things I want to cover. Let's go back to the datasheet view. Now, any changes that you make here will update the table, which makes sense because it's based upon a table. So we're looking at Max Klinger here, and he's got the weekly hours of 40. If I come in here, and this makes it nice, and I change it to 30, it'll update the table because how annoying this would be if I go to all this work and go, hey, while I'm here, let me go ahead and make a change. Because if it didn't allow me to make the change, and I have to go, oh, it's just right here. I'd have to go to the table, pull up the employees table, and make the change. So you can see I made the change from 40 to 30. There's the pencil. You can click on it, and it will save it, or hold down the Shift key and hit Enter. So what you do in this one, because it's based upon the table here, employees, when I double click, let's look at Max. Oh boy, we got to scroll over to find his, there we go, 30 will update the other, and vice versa. So if I come in here and I go, now let's go back to 40, hold down the Shift key, hit Enter, then I close out. Hey, it's back to 40. And then finally, let's go back to the design view. You've got these fields here. This little asterisk right up above, I know you were asking me about it, because now's the time to cover it. Let's go ahead and get rid of these fields down below. Click and drag and hit delete. And what that does is when you add the asterisk down below, it adds all these fields to your query, but it puts them in that one field. Because, well, in previous versions of Access, you only get so many spots to add fields to your query. So if you have a lot of tables from tables here and other queries that you're adding a lot of fields and you're running out of room, well, just go ahead and let's double click. It adds the whole table, all the fields from that table you want to see. Alrighty. Click on the Fun Run button. There you go. It's all there. So let's go ahead and go back to the design view. So that way you can go ahead and save some space and not have to, double click on every field or click and drag those fields down below. The only problem with this is that when I want to do a custom calculated field, like I want to create a field here that takes one of these fields, like the hourly rate, and multiply it by 10% because everybody gets a 10% pay increase, I can't do it because it wants to look at that field separately from, well, the asterisks that we added that put all the fields together. So we'll learn about this in a later training video where you can create your own custom field here and say here, let's write a formula or function that will take this field and multiply it by 10%. And it won't do it unless you add that field down below into the grid, even though you've added technically by the asterisk down below all the fields. It has to be its own separate field. So we double click here and then come over here and we would write the function or formula that would actually see that field as a separate field, because if you try to write that function or formula without that field there, even though it's there, well, it's not going to work, and you'll see that. As you recall in an earlier training video, we learned how to apply filters to our records within the tables, where we can pull in some and hide others. Now those same filter features are also available in queries. So if I open up a table, you can see up here on the Home tab in the Sort and Filter group, we got our filters. Let me go ahead and close out of that. So when I open up a query, the inventory query, double click. Home tab, same thing, the Sort and Filter group. So you can go ahead and use the general filter, the advanced filter, filter by selection, or of course you can go ahead and right click on the cell that you want to filter by, like the number 100. So it equals 100. We have a total of 3 records. And then you got the toggle and filter feature to go from what's being filtered back to when it wasn't filtered to going back to being filtered again. And then let's go ahead and click the advanced to clear all filters. so we can't do any togglage anymore. And so what I want to do when it comes to filtering records is say that, well, these are pretty simplistic filters, but when it comes to queries, there's a more advanced way of filtering your records, and that's using the criteria field. To find that field, we got to go to the design view of our query, and you can do that by right-clicking on the tab, going to the design view. What a mess. I'm so embarrassed. Well, let me go ahead and clean this up. Click and drag the split bar down. There we go. I feel better. Now I can see the bottom part of my computer's table. And so speaking of which, you can see that my query is based upon these 4 tables here. And then down below on the grid from those tables are the fields that I want to see in the datasheet view of my query. And that includes these 2 from the departments table, those 2 from the employees, 1 from computers, a couple from manufacturers, and then more from the computers. So you don't have to group your fields together by table, which makes it nice in our queries here, and I didn't, as you can see. Let me go ahead and click and drag the scrolly bar so I can go all the way back to the beginning to my first field here, the department code. And you can see down below, we've got the criteria row. So if I want to set the conditions or the criteria that a field has to meet before it can pull in those records, like for the department code, then I have to click in that criteria cell for the department code, as opposed to like maybe for the department name, but let's keep it simple because we just covered it by filtering by selection, right-clicking and saying it has to equal 100. So instead, we can just type it in here, type in 100. After you type in your criteria, you want to exit the cell by hitting the tab key, so Access, when you do that, can go back and check the cell, the contents they're in, make sure everything's gauche, because if it doesn't like it, it'll give you an error and say, what are you doing? So far, we're good. Now, if I come back in here and I type in something that it may not catch, like some text, because, well, the department code is a numeric field, when I hit the tab key, you see how it didn't give me any errors. But when I come up here to view the results of my criteria here, click on it, it says, hey, the data type is a mismatch. You got numbers and you're trying to filter for text. Ain't happening. So we'll click okie dokie. And let's clear this out, type in 100, hit the tab key, then come back up here, let's view it. Hey, there we go. We got our 3 records. Let's go ahead and right click, go back to the design view, and let's do something a little bit more fancy. How about if we do multiple criterias? So we'll leave this one here, that it has to meet that criteria, 100. And in addition, it has to meet, let me scroll over here, like the purchase price. Let's say that it has to be less than $1,500 because any computer that we bought that was less than $1,500 is probably a cheap computer, and so it's probably time to upgrade. Okay, that's my way of thinking. In any case, to have it less than $1,500, you want to use the less than symbol. So hold down the Shift key, hit the comma on the keyboard, there's the less than, and then type in 1,500 after it. And then you want to hit the tab key because upon exit, it'll check your work and make sure everything's okay, and it looks like it is. Now, if you're like, okay, it's got to be less than 1,500, so it can't be 1,500, right? Well, what if you want it to be less than or equal to? So to include 1,500, to do that, you want to type in your equals after the less than or greater than symbol, because if you type it in before, hit equals, hit the tab key, it's going to have a problem. Okay. So we got to delete the equals before and type it in after the less than symbol, and then hit the tab key, and it loves me. Let's go ahead and view the results of this by coming up here, clicking on the view button. Hey, we have 1. So it has to be 100 for the first criteria that we set. And let's scroll over and see if it meets the, that was close. It's not 1,500, it's less than 1,500, and if it was 1,500, that would be okay because we said it can be equal to 1,500, or of course less than, so that checks out. Let's go ahead and right-click, go back to the design view, and let's do another one. Let me go ahead and clear the criteria, delete it, and let's do it for the manufacturer. Let me make sure I'm in that criteria row. It gets a little bit challenging if you're way over here and you're like, criteria, is it on this row? Well, what you can do is that you can go ahead and scroll over so the field that you're looking at has a label right next to it. Okay, that's a little bit easier, isn't it? And for the criteria for the manufacturer, let's say it's got to be the name global. Type it in, hit the tab key. Now, if it's text that you're typing in, it'll automatically add the quotes around it, which, by the way, you ought to put quotes around it, but what's the point in telling you when it does it for you? So it'll add it around it, in case if you're wondering. That way it's focused on everything in between the quotes, the text there, global. Now, it's not case sensitive because if I open up my manufacturers table, double click, I got an uppercase G, not a lowercase. So that's good to know. I don't have to use an extra finger to hold down the shift key to make it uppercase. Just type it in. As long as the spelling's correct, then you've got it. So it's got to meet two conditions now, department code 100 and the manufacturer has to be global. Come up here, click on the view button, and we've got one. It meets the 100 and it's global. Oh, that's fancy. Well, let's go back to the design view here. And let's try something else. Let's say that the department code, well, still has to equal 100, but let's say it doesn't have to equal both 100 and global. It can be 100 or it can be global because maybe we have a manufacturer that isn't in the department 100, but another department that's global. So what we can do is we can delete that and come down to the OR row and type in global, hit the tab key. So it can either equal 100 or global. Let's go ahead and click on the view button. And do we have them all equaling 100? Of course not, because it says it can either equal 100, and if it doesn't, it's either 100 or global. Oh, that's fun. So that way we can pull in all the rest, and coincidentally, this one meets both conditions. It's 100 and it's global. Let's go back to the design view. And let's do something a bit more. How about if we say it can equal global, or in addition to the 100 criteria, it can be either that or global, or how about we also add or SpyTech? So if I click after global, hit the spacebar, type in or, and then type in SpyTech, hit the tab key, puts the O, the lowercase o, in uppercase, so the conjunction is or, and then it puts quotes around the text SpyTech. So now it can equal 100 for the department code, or it can be global, or it can be SpyTech. So if it meets any one of those three criterias, it's going to pull it in. Let's go ahead and come up here, click on the view button. Okay, so it met some of them. Well, the 100 here, it pulled in the 100s, and then if it didn't meet that, it could be either that or, we got to come over here, global or SpyTech. Is there any that's not global or SpyTech? Well, it's Sunbelt, but it does equal the other criteria, which is 100. So it's going to be pulled in. So you can just go crazy with all these ORs and setting up your criteria, but it's a good start. So let's go ahead and click on the design button to go back. And you see all these check boxes here. If you want to be able to set criteria for a field, but you don't want to see the field, like let's scroll back to the beginning here. Like the department code, I don't want to see that. I just want the criteria to pull in those departments that have 100 for the code. You can go ahead and uncheck it. Click on the view button. Department code's not there, but the department name is. So remember, it has to equal 100 or global or SpyTech. Well, that one's Sunbelt, so it's got to have the department code of 100. We can't see it, but it's doing its job behind the scenes. So that's cool. Let's go ahead and go back to the design view. And one other thing that I want to show you is that you don't have to be in the OR field to do an OR. So for example, like the department code, it could be 100 space or space 200. Hit the tab key. Oh, it likes that. Didn't give me any problems. And you can see that it went from the lowercase o to the upper O, so looks like it's ready for it. So we've got, wow, 4 criterias that it can meet. It can be 100 or 200 or global for the manufacturer or SpyTech. Let's go ahead and click on the view button. Oh, you know what? Let's go back to the design view. I do want to see this. That would be helpful. Let's go ahead and click on the view button. So there's the department code. So it can be 100 or 200. And if it's not 100 or 200, then it has to be SpyTech or global. Well, there's 2 here that's not SpyTech or global, and it's Sunbelt. So if it's Sunbelt, then it has to have either 100 or 200 for the department code. And so let's go back to the design view. Now, before we go any further, I want to clear out all the criteria, and the quickest way to do that is to go ahead and select the entire row. And you can do that by coming over here to the row header for criteria, but go right up and just over that line until you can see a black arrow. Click on it, it selects the entire row, hit the delete key, and it clears out everything, all the criteria. Now, up until this point, we learned how to set criteria for the fields that contain the data type of text or numbers. How about a date? Well, not with me. I mean to set criteria up for a date field. To do that, let's go ahead and find one. Oh, there we go. Let me scroll over. Date received. So let's say that all the computers that we received before a certain date are now outdated, and we need to find out who has them and, buy them new ones. So to be able to type this in, like all those computers that we received before January 1st, 2008, go ahead and type in the less than symbol. Less than means that anything comes before the date that I'm about to type in, which is 1/1/08. Now, if you want to include that date, you want to go ahead and type in the equals just after the less than symbol, or if it was greater than, comes after it. Don't type it in before, as you recall in an earlier training video. Access doesn't like that. It's got to come after. And then after you type it in, hit the tab key to make sure that Access accepts it, and you can see what it did after I hit the tab key. It added the 20 for 2008, and also it added pound symbols around the date. Now let's go ahead and see if we have any records that comes prior or before January 1st, 2008. Come up here, click on the View button, and we got a total of 22. Let's scroll over here. There's nothing that says 2008. It's all before it. Great. How about the other way? Let's go ahead and go back to the design view and flip this around and see if we have any computers that we purchased or received after January 1st, 2008. So hit the delete key and flip the symbol so it's going greater than, or hold down the shift key and hit the period on the keyboard. Hit the tab key, it accepts it, beautiful. Come up here, click on the View button, and we got a total of 2 records. Well, let's confirm it. Okay, both of them come after January 1st, 2008. Great. Let's go back to the design view. And let's kick this up a notch. How about if we want to find the computers that we received between 2 dates? Ooh, that's pretty tricksy. Let's come in here and delete the contents they're in, and this is how you do it. So if you want it to come after a certain date but before another, we'll type in the greater than symbol and then the date that we want it to come after, so greater than 6/1/06. So it has to come after June 1st of 2006. Hit the space bar and then type in and. So the and conjunction means that it has to meet both conditions or criteria. Remember how we did the or, where it can be either that or this or that? Well, now it has to meet both. It has to come before June 1st of 2006, and then we do less than or and less than 1/1/08. Hit the tab key and change the lowercase a to an uppercase A for and. Great. And if you can't see it and you need to make changes, you can click inside and use the arrow keys, or better yet, you can right-click on the cell and go to Zoom to zoom in, and it opens up the cell, makes it huge, so you can go ahead and work with the contents therein a lot easier than that little thing. So you see it has to come after that date but before the other date. It's got the and there. Can't be or. It's got to meet both criterias. So let's go ahead and click Okie dokie and take it for a test drive. And let's come up here, click on the View button, and then scroll over to the dates. So it has to come after June 1st of 06, and well, that squeaked by just by a few days there. So it did come after June 1st of 06, but it has to come earlier than January 1st of 2008, and all of these do. So great. Let's go ahead and go back to the design view, and let's change this up a bit. So if I want to go ahead and work with the contents therein, of course you can right-click and go zoom, zoom, zoom. Or if you're a keyboard person and you like keyboard shortcuts, hold down the Shift key and hit F2. Well, make sure you're in the cell here. Then hold down the Shift and hit F2, and it does the zoom feature as well. So instead of using the less than, greater than symbols, we can go ahead and delete those. And instead, let's go ahead and use between. Yeah, type in the word between. That comes before the first date, and then of course we're still going to use the conjunction and because it has to meet both dates, so between this date and that date. So without using the less than or greater than symbols, I can't nail the exact date of June 1st or January 1st, but it's got to be in between. So you can do that and go ahead and click Okie dokie, hit the tab key, go ahead and click on the View button and scroll over. So in between those dates, let's go back. So you can do it that way, back to the design view. And in addition to that, how about if we don't want to see anything listed between those 2 dates? So not, that's the operative word, not. Let's go ahead and click before between and type in not space, hit the tab key, puts it in uppercase. Now let's go ahead and click on the view button to find in all those computers that weren't received between June 1st of 2006 and January 1st of 2008. And of course that comes before June 2006. Now that one comes after January 1st of 2008, so we're good there. And okay, looks like we're not seeing anything that's not between those two dates, June 1st, 2006 and January 1st of 2008. Just what comes before and after those two dates. Now for some reason you have blanks in a cell, like let's come up here and delete Bob, and then go ahead and hold down the Shift key and hit Enter. Let's say that I accidentally deleted it or I simply didn't type it in, and I want to find all those records that contain empty values in the first name field because maybe we want to get rid of them, purge the database, clean it out because they're just, well, they're obsolete, they don't work, or maybe go ahead and do some investigation and find out who this person is, their first name. Well, you can see it's right there. That's easy. But let's say we had thousands of records and we want to find all those who don't have a first name. Let's go ahead and go back to the design view. And oh, we better clean up our criteria here because we don't want anything else but what we want to look for, those records that don't have a first name. So let's get rid of this, click and drag and delete it. And let's go ahead and click and drag this all the way to the beginning. There we go, first name. So to find all those records that have an empty value in the first name, nothing in there, you want to type in null. Then hit the tab key and it says is null or is empty. So when I come up here and click on the view button, it found, well, that record that doesn't have anything in the first name field. Let's go ahead and go back to the design view. So you can do it that way, or how about you want to find or search for only those records that do have something in the first name field. So maybe we want to do some marketing and we just don't have time to sort through all those records that don't have an address, or in this case, a first name to call the person and say, Mr. Appleman. You know, it sounds more personable by first name. So what we can do is we can come in here where it says is null and type just before null, N-O-N-T, like not, hit the space bar, hit the tab key. So you're saying is not empty. So let's come up here, click on the view button, and here's all the records that has something or that isn't empty in the first name field. Okay, let's do this another way. Let me go ahead and go back to the design view and clear this out and just go back and let's give Bob his name back. Bob. Welcome back, Bob. Hold down the Shift key, hit the Enter key, and he's back. Let's go back to the, well, before we go to the design view, you can see in the department column, let's do another example as far as searching for those records that don't contain, like let's say in the department name, the word IT. So as opposed to being empty or not being empty, let's say we don't want to find those records that have IT. So let's go back to the design view and go to the department name, the criteria field there, and type in less than, greater than. When you put them back to back like that, that means it's not equal to. And then of course hit the space bar and type in IT, so you don't want it to equal the IT department name. Hit the tab key, puts quotes around it, and then let's come up here, click on the view button, and in the department name, do we have any ITs? No, because it cannot equal that in order to meet the condition or the criteria to be seen here. Cool, so we don't have to focus on the IT dudes. Let's go ahead and go back to the design view. And one last thing that I think you might find helpful, let me delete that. And let's go to the last name field. You can actually use the less than or greater than symbols for text. Well, more specifically for letters of the alphabet, what I'm going to show you. So if I type in the greater than symbol and the letter K for the last name, it means that anything that comes after those names that begin with the letter K. Hit the tab key to make sure everything's gauche, and then come up here, click on the view button, and for the last name, is there anything that comes after K? Well, it includes anything that begins with the letter K, so we don't have to type in equals, but if we did, it wouldn't work anyways. So it includes anybody whose last name begins with the letter K and that comes after it. So let me sing that song, HIJKLMNOPQRSTU. Oh, it worked. Great. How about if we flip it? Let's go ahead and right click, go to the design tab, and say instead of going anything that comes after, how about anything that comes before at the upper end of the alphabet? Hit the tab key, click on the view button, And anything that comes before that begins with the letter K, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K, doesn't include the K's. Only the greater than symbol includes or is equal to that letter, the letter K. Thanks for watching. Hey, as a quick reminder, if you like my video, please give it a thumbs up. You can also click on me and subscribe to my channel to get notified of the latest videos. And for great specials on my products, please see the description below this video.